Cade Summers, did you take my table?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
You mean that medieval table you use to stretch the minds of your students?
Are you suggesting I torture my kids?
If you're catching what I'm laying down.
Stop watching The Princess Bride and come help me figure out where this table went. Welcome to Across the Hall, a podcast sharing ELA strategies from one door away with your hosts, Cade Summers and Michelle Shelton. This is episode 13, Cultivating Culture. Hey, y'all, I'm Michelle.
And I'm Cade.
And we are sitting here during our summer break, not much of a vacation, sitting here podcasting, but we are thinking a lot this summer about building culture, especially as we're getting ready for this next school year, right?
Right. The summertime is a good time to think about culture because it is hard to create a new culture once students have gotten to know you and you've known them and you've gotten into a classroom routine. So it's tough to do that around December or January or February, at least a major shift in culture. So you want to start the year out right.
Well, that's one of the things that's really good about being a teacher and being in education is that you get kind of this reboot every year of getting to this fresh start, getting to start all over and starting something new, fixing what you think you may have not done so well the year before and change some things up. So
yeah, what do we mean by culture?
Well, I think that it is kind of the overall feeling, the set expectations, the common shared experience in a school. Is that what you would call it?
I think so. I like your word shared there. It makes me think of all the different stakeholders that are involved with students and teachers and support staff and administrators and parents and community, and all of those people to some extent help establish and continue the culture that you are trying to create from as close in proximity as your classroom to as wide as the community and state where you are.
One of those things that we think about over the summer, and we'll get into this as we interview with Miss Joy Kirr today, is the classroom itself. Over the summer, I know teachers all over the place are working on those classrooms, trying to get them fancy and get them ready for the students to come in August or September, whenever you begin school. And that's part of our culture. It's what you see.
Some of those culture shifts that she considers in her book pertain to grading, as well as classroom environment, feedback, communication with parents.
Talked a little bit about relationships, just a lot about student ownership and students really having that central role in the classroom rather than it being very teacher-centered.
Right. So we hope that you will benefit from this particular episode of Across the Hall.
Let's get started.
We have Joy Kirr with us. She is the author of Shift This. Hello, Joy.
Hi, Joy.
You too.
Book was published just in the last year, right, Joy?
May of 17.
So, Joy, to get started, I thought it would be nice to start just by asking you about personally where you teach your school. Is it private or public? Give us some of the demographics or specifics about what you teach and where you teach.
Okay, I teach in the Chicago suburbs. We are just west of O'Hare, maybe a little north of O'Hare as well. And so it's a pretty affluent area. It's 6th through 8th. We have 1,000 students right now. I have 7th grade ELA, and hopefully they keep me there because I started there as a reading specialist for 7 years, but then I went to 7th grade and I've changed a little bit team-wise, but I like some consistency in my life. So right now I'm at 7th grade still, and I think for next year as well. I haven't seen a change on the schedule yet, so that's nice. I have 3 classes, 80 minutes each, which is a dream. And the maximum amount of students I have this year is 25 in one class. And I co-teach my middle class because we have about 5 or 4 resource students in there.
That does sound like a dream. I love those 80-minute blocks. That is nice.
Mm-hmm.
So why shift? What's up with the title of the book? It seems to have some assumptions about what has become standard or status quo in education.
Well, it started because I like to ride my bike. And I know that when you shift gears going up a hill, it makes it much easier to get up that hill. And so that's sort of where it started. But there was a woman who wanted me to write a book about Genius Hour, and I said no, because everybody else had already done it, and I'm not an expert, I'm just an evangelist. And so she said, well, what would you write about? And I said, the things that Genius Hour has done for me, which have been little shifts. I jumped into Genius Hour, but then the little things I've changed because of it could be considered tiny little shifts if you took them all separately. So I thought, you know what, people are always scared of Genius Hour. Not always, but many people are scared of jumping in. So what if they just tried this, or just tried this, or just tried this? And so it all came together as, there are little shifts in homework. There are little shifts I've gone through in grading throughout the years. And now my class looks totally different than it did 10 years ago, but it's because of all these teeny tiny little shifts. And then sometimes you have to go back as well. And, I grew up in a typical public school as well. And so I'm used to the same old homework and the same old grading that we were all used to. And this was a huge shift from that. And I did get some resistance from coworkers and students and parents. So that's why the shift. And I did drive a stick shift car first.
I can definitely relate to what you're saying. I've been teaching for over 18 years, and for sure my classroom does not look anything today like it looked then. And if it did, I would feel very unsuccessful and very stale in my job. So making those little shifts is not only good for the students, but it's been good for me as well.
Exactly. Doesn't it make you more excited about what you're doing?
Absolutely. I didn't want school to end this year. I've already been complaining about being bored and wanting to go back to school. And why don't we have year-round school? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with myself all summer besides
plan for next year.
Plan for school. That's what I do. Yeah. One of the shifts that you talk about making is in your actual classroom environment. And that is something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially with it being summer, and thinking about my classroom for next year and how I want to set it up. So how did that start happening? Like, what small shift did you make before it ended up where it is now?
Well, when I started quote unquote Genius Hour, before it was Genius Hour for me, we were just reading. I said, you know what, my kids aren't reading enough, let's just read. And so for that 40 minutes, all of a sudden they were sitting in all different parts of the room. And I'm like, what's going on, people? This was back in 2009. So I was like, I was not used to this. And it was really only maybe it was 2012, but it was really only my second or third year in the classroom, because I was not in the classroom before that. And so it was different for me. And I'm like, why are they under the table? Or why is she sitting on the table over in that corner? And I don't get it. And that person looks like they need a pillow. So it started with pillows. I'm going to go to Goodwill and I'm going to get $3 pillows that used to be cushions. And they loved them. And then they sat everywhere. I'm like, all right, well, what if we move the tables around? If we tried this. So it started with moving the tables, because I have big tables in the room and plastic chairs that go along with them. And then I went to a conference, and the curriculum director was there, and she said to us as a group, she said, whatever you guys need, after this conference, if there's something you feel you need, let us know. And I just looked at my principal who happened to be there. I said, wheels. I want wheels, because then you can really move the tables around, because these are heavy tables. And so sure enough, the next year I got casters on the bottom. I'm like, this is perfect. And so the other teachers hate it, though, because all their tables are really heavy. And when they lean on mine, they move. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. And they're always falling all over. But I love it, because I can move them anytime I want. And if we do a fishbowl discussion, okay, you guys know how the tables go. Let's go. And I time them, and they move them real fast. And it's very versatile just having those casters on the bottom, And then those blue plastic chairs, I don't want to sit in those all day. And so when we got rid of our old kitchen set, I brought the kitchen chairs into the classroom. My mom gave me her rocking chair. I've found a stool outside. Little things like that make another difference in our class that's different from the rest of their classes. There was an old teacher chair that someone was going to throw out. I'm like, perfectly fine. It's just old, And so we took that one, and the kids love sitting in the big teacher chair. It's like, all right, go for it. Who am I to say you should be sitting in these blue plastic chairs? And their tailbones are growing. It's got to hurt every now and then. So yeah, we made those shifts slowly again. The cushions are kept in the back of the room in a pile, and if they leave it out, I put it away for 2 weeks. And once all the cushions are gone for 2 weeks, then I'll bring them back again, and we learn the responsibility again of putting them away yourself, because I am getting older and I'm tired of bending over and picking up after them. So these little things, they just happen over time.
I actually love that little trick to do that, because my kids I have about 3 cushions in my room, and they'll get them and put them in their desk. And we have desks. I have 30 desks in my room, but they will get them and sit on the floor, and they'll put them in their desks to make it more comfortable. And then I just find them everywhere. So that's a good idea to put them up for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Or 1 week.
With our own children would put up
Right? Exactly.
I went to our big old cafeteria. They use it for cheer practice now, and it has all kinds of old furniture just strewn around everywhere. Half of it is inoperable, and you'd have to kind of piece it together and fix it. But I got 4 tables and put those in my room and got rid of about 10 desks, because I used to have about 30 desks, and now I've put it down to 20, and I have 4 big round tables in my room. So that was my first step. A downside with mine was it required an Allen wrench, and it started getting weak one day, and I was like, this table leg's loose. And so I got the engineering teacher to come over, and he's about 6'4", middle-aged gentleman, great teacher, but he leaned over on this desk to Allen wrench it, and he ended up falling. Somehow he managed to fall straight on his back. So the next day I came with my own Allen wrench.
Yes. And you have to keep it in the student station along with your screwdrivers to get the lockers open.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
So as far as the number of desks in a room, we were talking about this before the interview. For a class to shift that way, and you still have to kind of plan for those days when you give the ACT Aspire or some kind of standardized test where kids can't be closely grouped. How do you manage your classroom or set up your classroom, the number of desks versus tables, etc.?
Right. Well, you can borrow from another group if you want. I know we have the park test, and so this year I just made sure that all the tables were in rows, just like in typical classrooms. And then we did have 2 tables at the back that seat 4 in a square. And so those students, the 2 were facing the way everybody else was facing. And then the other 2, they sat off to the side. So we did have 2 tables off to the side. And I have 28 in my homeroom, so we did have to get the 28 in there. But, I'm not that worried about it. I'm not that worried that they're going to cheat or whatnot. So it was we just rearranged it for the day, and then the next day, and then we put it back for our regular classes after homeroom was over. But the wheels made that possible. You're still going to have the rows sometimes. And sometimes the kids like the rows. Sometimes they want that order. I've had them choose their own seating arrangements. Like, okay, do you want this one, or this one? And then I have them vote, and they'll pick the rows sometimes. I'm like, all right, we'll do it. If you're comfortable with it, okay. It does make it easier sometimes.
So talking about the students choosing, in your book, you talk about how the students actually help you to design your classroom and decorate it. So how does that work?
Well, at the beginning of the year, there's nothing on the walls except I have one little bulletin board that has last year's book choices on there. So this year, at the end of the year, I'll ask them, what was your favorite book this year? Then I'll print those out and I'll put those on a portion of it. I have a long bulletin board along the hallway side. And then I have a chalkboard in the back, a teeny tiny one that we use for literary graffiti. So they choose what quotes that they want to put there from their books. And then the rest of the walls really are concrete bricks or books. There's not a lot more room. And so at the beginning of the year, when we write our 6-word memoirs, I just say, okay, hang it up somewhere. Anywhere? Yeah, hang it up somewhere. So when the bulletin board gets full from my first class, the other 2 classes are like, anywhere? I'm like, yeah, anywhere. So they put them on the ceilings, they put them on the windows, they put them on the door, and it starts to feel like, okay, this is a classroom now. But right now, I'm telling you, we have 6 days left, and everything is all over the place. So the last day, I'm going to say, take down what's yours, because I don't want to be taking all of it down at the end of the year if they don't want it anymore. And my original plan was, go ahead and put something up, and then once you find something better to put up, put that up and take the other one down. But that just hasn't happened. They just keep adding to it. A little crazy.
I would like to see a picture of your room right now.
And then sometimes they fall off the ceiling or the tape falls off, and then so they're blowing when the window's open. I'm like, I don't have time for that. When it falls down, then we'll put it back up. We'll let it blow for now.
I like your go with the flow attitude. That's good. That's good.
Why not?
So it seems that you put a lot of emphasis in student choice and also on relationships. I've noticed some things that you have written about student relationships. I am personally really, really bad at forming good relationships with students. I can put off like I form good ones, but honestly, I admire other teachers who really get to know their students a lot better than I do. And I can see the students' input in their classrooms is a little bit better than my classroom. So what ways do you tap into relationship building in your classroom, and maybe offer any kind of suggestions that you happen to have?
I do make sure that every day I confer with some students. Now, I won't get to everybody every day, obviously, but I will confer with at least 3 students a day. And whether that's about what book they're reading or what they did this weekend or just something, it could be at the beginning of the period before the bell rings, or at the end of the period while kids are just packing up their stuff. But I make sure I talk to the students individually. Some of them I still don't have a good relationship. Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't know anything about Tim this year except that he plays video games all night long. And I only know this because we filled out a clock of our time, and he put, I'm telling you, he put from like 5 to 10, it's video games. After he eats, he just plays. So that's all I know about him. And he's very, very quiet. So I'll ask him, what did you do this weekend? Nothing. Who did you see? Nobody. Like, he won't give to me, but I keep trying. And just, I don't know if I'm kicking myself in the butt, but I'm trying. And that's all I can do. So we don't have a good relationship, but in his other classes, he's the same, I've heard. So that's good. At least not like one class he blossoms, but it makes me feel better. I don't know if that's good, but it makes me feel better. But I have to confer every day. And that started when I started giving them individual time to read. I had the time to go around and see them. So when you have a Genius Hour time, you've got the time to go around and see them, at least. When I did Genius Hour once a week, I saw half the kids one week and then the other half the next week. And I made sure I saw them because I had a checklist and everything, and that helped. But this year I don't really have a checklist. I do put our conversations sometimes, if they're about reading or writing, I'll put those in their grade book as narrative feedback. So I sort of know who I've gotten to and who I haven't. But I do make sure that I sit and talk with kids. And it's just, okay, curriculum can wait if I'm just going to spend this 1 minute with this child right here. And that has made a huge difference.
Whenever Cade said he wasn't very good at this, you probably sounded a little shocked, because I absolutely disagree. I taught, I used to teach the cross the hall from him, and he's fabulous with his students and connecting with them. So I don't really know what he's talking about. I think his expectations are a little high.
Well, you just hear, certain teachers are almost magic in working out the students' inner lives, the problems they have at home, the struggles they're dealing with. And I don't get that. If anything, I get like the super awesome high five giving, get pumped up in the hallway sort of thing that can almost seem completely superficial. And I feel like I get the outward stuff that might be pump uppy and feel good, but I don't always get, what are you really struggling with? And I guess that's what I'm referring to. I struggle tapping into that.
Doesn't it depend too on where they feel the most comfortable? Like, if they're not, are you teaching English, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, if they're not an ELA person, if they're not strong in reading or writing, they might not go to you. They might go to a teacher that they feel stronger with curriculum, because they think they have a better relationship with them because they're doing better in the class too. And I know, like, I do have a stronger relationship with those kids that love reading or writing. That's much stronger with us because we have more to talk about. But yeah. And for me, there is a girl across the hall who gets way more of the deep stuff spoken with her. They go to her for the deep things. And I'm like, well, that's good, because I'm okay. You can leave me out of that now.
I need to.
That's the thing.
You take that.
I like that approach.
I'll take the high fives. You go over there.
I need to change my mentality.
Right? There you go.
Yeah, you do. Okay, so I'm going to ask this next question, because Cade has actually tried Genius Hour in his class and I have not. So tell me what Genius Hour is. He has tried and he has failed. So will you please explain to me what Genius Hour is?
I feel like I fail every year at it. So.
I don't think he failed at Genius Hour. I mean, he failed at describing it to me.
Oh, that's what I was wondering.
I'm so sorry. Let me be clear.
Pretty well, Sheldon. I was about to have a talk after the episode here.
No. He failed at explaining it to me.
I thought it went pretty well. I think I structured. A key part of it was structure, which the first time around when I just was getting started, it kind of had that feel, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, like it had the feel of, okay, guys, go look up something, and didn't give a presentation on it, and I needed structure, which seemed almost counterintuitive to the process.
Right.
I'll stop talking about it since she's laughing.
Well, you get really excited about it.
You're the expert,
right?
Yeah, that's right.
No, I'm the evangelist. Yeah. Yeah. And I am the evangelist because I think that you go back to the reason why. So why would anybody even try something like giving over this time to students for them to learn what they want to learn? What's the point? And so the point is they're bored with school. They don't all want to be there. We're teaching them things that we deem important. And we're getting farther and farther from what they deem important because we're getting older. They're staying the same age. And we're seeing all these different students who, when they talk about Fortnite, it's a whole nother language to me. I have no clue what they're talking about. So this is the fact to make them, that was my why, and that's what drove me. And it's really just setting aside time for students to learn or create or do what they want to do. And sometimes you have presentations at the end. Sometimes it is more structured than others. A lot of people are not good at letting go of that control at all. So it's way more structured. And then some people get all excited about it right away. They're like, yeah, I got to do that tomorrow. And then there's hardly any structure, but you still run with it because it's important to give them that time to pursue what they want to pursue. My first tip would be to do it on your own first this summer. Give yourself your own genius hour and say, okay, what am I going to spend an hour a week doing, or however much time you're going to share with the kids? What am I going to do? Because it's hard to come up with a topic, if you're not really passionate about something, or if you already do things that you're really good at, or, you've got your life under control. It's hard to come up with a topic. I tried a couple different ones. I tried writing poetry. I ended up just hating it. I'm like, why did I even go here? And then I tried my banjo. But I wanted my nails to grow out, and I can't play the banjo when my nails are growing out. So little things like that. And I gave myself a rubric for blogging about it, and I did not get an A ever on my blog. So you've got to try what you're going to ask the kids to do. You've got to try it yourself and try it outside of school so that when you come to school, you can say, okay, this is what I did this week. Here's my reflection on it. Let's see what you're going to do. And you've got to decide how much you're willing to let them go on their own way, because some of them will have things that you think are not worthy, but this is theirs. And you've got to make sure that you're okay with them doing what they want to do and not what you think is worthy or not.
You mentioned rubrics, and I guess now's a good time because that was on our list of things to talk a little bit about as we wanted to discuss some regarding grading. In our own school system, all the grades up through fifth grade have been standards-based and gradually shifting into standards-based for about the last, 5 or 6 years. They started with our current, what's going to be now sixth graders, and implemented it. And so each grade that they move up a new grade level is incorporating standards-based grading. And so we've been having more and more PD on standards-based grading just in the last few weeks. And we see that shift in our high school happening over the next few years. So you mentioned rubrics. Before we get too much into the standards-based grading part, I'm interested in to what extent do you have students create their own rubrics, maybe for Genius Hour or even, other writing assignments and that sort of thing?
This year, I haven't done that at all, only because I am going without grades for the year. So it's just narrative feedback. And so I take the language from the rubric and I put that into the grade book as a narrative thing. This is what you did and this is what you didn't do. And then I'll add a YouTube link to a screenshotted feedback of me watching their writing, little things like that. I'll just put that stuff in there. So I have not had them come up with the rubrics. I figured that was just too much for me to handle, Right. And I feel like if I were to do that, I'd do the single rubric that Jennifer Gonzalez talks about. I try that. Okay, are you on this side of it or this side of it? And I'd have them try and come up with the wording. But I feel like it's powerful for the students to come up with the wording, but I have a hard time coming up with it as well. And I know our teachers worked really hard on some of our writing rubrics. And so I really like the language, and I'm kind of, I'm for that language right now because it helps me give them the feedback I need to give them. So I have not worked on that.
That actually touches on what I was going to ask you. And that is, are you and everyone in your department using the same rubrics? Do y'all plan together and use the same? Well,
I think this year we are using the same rubrics. I'm not sure, but I think we are, because we really, really liked them 2 years ago. We have not revisited them because we're revisiting our whole curriculum. We're going to go to a reading and writing workshop. We've tried 3 different pilots in the last 2 years, but I think the rubrics we're using are consistent because we worked with them. We saw student writing and we we each graded them and saw where we had differences and where we needed to tweak the language. And it was a really good activity we did for about 2 years. We did that. We were led with professional development just on how to look at their writing and how to use the rubrics and how to change the rubrics for that. So yeah, I think we're happy with our rubrics right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Take that time to really, really think about it and tear it apart like that. That's awesome.
Yeah. We're a little behind on the standards-based grading. Right now, I think our elementaries are going to it next year. But that's it. I mean,
so is that just something that you're doing in your class?
I am, but I'm not. Like, the kids don't call it that. We don't call it that. We're just, okay, let's look at this evidence and see what it really means. And we have to put it into a letter at the end of the quarter. But I think elementary is going there next year. And I just hope that we do more parent development instead of not just a teacher professional development, but more information for parents so they don't freak out.
So first, I'm curious about what those conferences look like. Like I know I had read on your blog that you were in the process of having conferences with your students and conversations about what grade they would receive. I'd like to hear a little bit about that because so many schools don't practice that and teachers don't practice that. So feel free to discuss like what were the conversations like and how the kids responded. And in a minute, I would like to talk a little bit about parents too and trying your methods of trying to reach out to them and change the way they think about standards-based grading.
That's funny. Changing the way people think.
Yeah, you can do it. You've written a book.
I can try. The conversations with the kids are the best part of this no grades till the end of the quarter thing. They are the best part. So what I do is I reserve a week of able to sit with 6 students a day. So I just finished yesterday. Actually, I had one more straggler today because our grades have to be in on Tuesday. And so I just finished yesterday. And then today was reserved for anybody who I had missed. But what we do is we look at their comprehension for each week of their thing. I do have numbers in the grade book, but they don't average because I have them in the comments section instead of in the actual box. And so we look at the numbers. We say, okay, how did you do it? This type of question, this type of question. Okay, that would be your average for about reading. And here's how much you read outside of school. Here's the effort you put into school. And the kids still think that the effort counts for a grade. And we go back and forth on that. My husband and I go back and forth on that. Does effort count towards your grade? Does progress count towards your grade? It's so arbitrary, these grades. Like every teacher has something different. So it's great to have these conversations with the kids because they're like, but look, I really improved. I'm like, yes, you did. And that's going to show in your achievement, or I really, really tried. Yes, but look at what you tried. And does it show in your achievement? It's not showing yet. And so these are great conversations and they're so open and honest. And they'll say stuff like, well, I think I deserve an A. I'm like, okay, where's your evidence? And they'll say, well, I don't have the evidence for an A. I'm like, okay, then let's look again. And it's great because they just want to get that A, or they've had an A in ELA before, and this is what I should get. One comment from a parent at open house this year, she said, yes, my daughter said, Mom, this is the first year I'm not going to get an A in ELA. And I said, why? She goes, because I'm actually going to have to learn something.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow, that's great. I laughed out of that. I wrote about it. I kept that in my pocket. Like, that's awesome. It's not a compliance thing. It's learning. And so that's why these conversations they're even if I weren't doing this, even if we were doing standards-based grading, I'd still have these conversations at the end of the quarter. And I'd still ask them, okay, what's up for next quarter? Or what's our goal for next quarter? Because then they write just one goal and then that's what they focus on for the next quarter. And we keep going back to that. So then the next time we meet, what was your progress on your goal? How did you do? How would you tweak it for next time? And so it's just great conversations. And I've had kids tell me odd things like, well, I don't ask for help. So that should be my goal. I'm like, that's a great goal. I didn't know that you needed help. Little things like that just come into that one-on-one conference of getting to know the kids and getting to know their strengths and their struggles and what's next. And it's great to have these honest conversations. Now, if you talk about the parents, the first quarter this year, I had a parent who did not read anything I sent home, who didn't watch the videos I sent home about how to check the comments in the grade book or how to check the comments to see where your child is. And when the grade came, he called and he said, I don't understand. When my child left this morning, he was getting an A in ELA because he said he was going to sit with you and show you what he was getting. And I see on the report card, it's a B+. like, well, yes, right. He was really upset. And I said, your child looked at his learning and was reflective and said, actually, I think I should get a B. And actually my co-teacher sat with him for that one, and she said, a B? I think it should be more like a B plus, because look, you're really close to this and this. And he's like, okay. And then he picked a comment for himself, which again, the dad didn't read, that the children were picking their own comments. And it said, is doing satisfactory work, but could do better. And I said, but everybody can do that, and he picked that for himself, and everybody can do better. And he said he washed his hands of ELA, and I haven't heard from him since. So, it's been a little odd talking to his child about his grade, because I don't know if he even talked to his child beforehand. Because I said, please talk to him and get back to me on what you want me to do next. We can give grades. We can make it way more specific in the grade book, whatever you need. And he didn't even talk to him before he called me again. And he said, I need to set up a time with the principal. I'm like, okay. So it was rough. It was really rough. But again, he didn't read anything I sent home. He didn't look at any of the information. And he said, I need more information on how you're doing this. I'm like, okay, I'll send it again. And I did. And then that was it. So some parents do have a really hard time with it. And a B plus is very different from an A minus in their mind. And how could you do that to my child? And I'm like, no, your child is reflective, and your child knows where his skills lie. So it's tough to have those conversations, but I think they're valuable.
Well, what a powerful conversation to have with the child that was able to really, and I was going to ask you, do they often give themselves a lower grade than what you would if you were doing it without them?
It's back and forth. And I think it depends on what they had last year, or what they're used to. Because even when they choose their own comments, they're like, is a joy to have in class? I'm like, okay, but is that the real comment you want? Look, we have 100 comments to choose from, or I could write my own. Well, I always get that. Okay. Yeah. So some of them think that they're higher up, some of them think that they're lower, and some of them are just like, oh, this is what I always get. So yeah, this is the type of student I am, which is kind of sad too.
That is sad.
Do your students, I like the responsibility that you're allowing them to have. Do the students compile a list of, or a binder full of work, a portfolio of any kind, to be able to pull out a piece of evidence and say, objectively, this is what I've been able to accomplish, and show that to you? Is that something that you have them practice?
I do that for them right now, because they're not used to that. And I tried that the first year, and they were like, I don't know where my stuff is. So I'm doing that for them. It's kind of a executive functioning nightmare for some of the kids to do it on their own. So I do have one summary sheet where I put, what I noticed, and it's right in their grade report anyway. I print one of those out with the narrative comments, and we look at both of those. So I do that together. I think once they're in high school, that'd be great to do. But right now, their brains aren't fully developed yet, and I don't want to put more pressure on them than they already have.
Joy, I teach ninth graders. I don't think their brains are fully developed yet either.
Not till they're 22 or 25 or so, right?
One of the questions that he asked earlier when we were bouncing this back and forth is, whenever you're looking out across your classroom, are they all working on the same standard at the same time, or are they working on different things?
I guess it depends on where they are. So if they're doing what we had talked about that day because they're on top of things, great. If they're behind, I want them to work on that stuff first, and if they're done with whatever we're doing, or they're really good at it, I say, hey, why don't you try this and this and this? So they're not always working on the same thing, which is more fun for me. It's a little more challenging, but it's okay. It's boring when they're all doing the same thing. Like, I have a really hard time with standardized tests, just like looking at them, but when they're all doing the same thing. So it's a little bit, it's more like 3 groups or so. Like, this group's all done and they're really good at, so they're moving on to this. This group is working on what we're doing today, and this group's a little behind. So I'm trying,
What do you say to people who ask you about rigor and making sure that you are meeting the standards while these kids are doing all these different things? Because we've had a couple different people. How was that worded in the conversation that we had, Cade?
You're referring to like PBL, project-based learning, maybe Genius Hour. I also think of
like design
to
thinking.
Some extent, design thinking fits in. But a lot of people I've heard in this conversation, at least, was that those types of things are extension activities, that those aren't necessarily for, as you referred to, your resource students, some of the lower achievers in the classroom. that those are for if you're getting the standards or not, that kind of thing. And I was shaking my head the same way you were, at least in my mind I was. I couldn't visualize it the way you are right now. But but anyway, would you comment on that?
Well, okay, so first you go back to your why. Why are we doing this? Especially for the kids that are struggling. Give them something they're successful at. Give them something that they can do. I have seen some posts on Twitter that say, if my kids are done with their work, then they can do Genius Hour, but only if they're done with their work. I'm like, yeah, but that work isn't relevant to them. That work is not what's keeping them in school. It's this hour or this 20 minutes or whatever you have for them that will keep them coming back and have them want to learn with you and have them give you your trust and make that connection with you. I mean, I feel like it's such a culture boost to give them that time in your class. And that makes the rest of your week go smoother because they have more of a connection with you. They trust you a little bit more and they know that you're going to give them this time. I hate it when they're like, no, you can't do that because you didn't finish this. You didn't finish this. I'm like, oh my gosh, dedicate this time for them. That's for them, especially those low achieving students that need some success, that would like to like school. That drives me crazy. It's not always about rigor. It's about getting them to want to learn.
Right. I know you said your second class is a resource class. What is the method or the style of your work with a co-teacher in the classroom?
Well, I've got the original plans, and I have her in my homeroom too. So I haven't done it lately because we've been so busy, but usually I can say, okay, this is what we're going to do this week. This is what we're going to work on. And I do have plans somewhere else that she can always look to. And she's like, hey, can we try this with it? Yep. Can we try this with it? Yep. And I always end up using that in my other two classes. So I think next year, I think she's going to push to be in my first class. And that would be great because then I can use those methods in my other two classes that day and not have to wait a day for the next class. And we work really well together because we're very frank with each other and we're both there for the kids. She told me when we first started working together, I'm hard to work with. I've been told I'm hard to work with. I'm like, oh, great. Thanks. I'm excited.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Right? I knew her before as a friend, but not as a colleague, like that. And so she said, that's what I heard, but I'm just going to tell it to you the way I see it. I'm like, that's great. And I'll tell you the same thing. And I'll tell you what I'm uncomfortable with and whatnot. So sometimes she'll want to try something and she'll say, go ahead. I'm like, no, it's your idea. You run with it. And then I'll be able to change it for my next class or do it how I need to do it the next class. So we work well together because we're both there for the kids and that we keep them up at the forefront.
So we were talking about parent communication a little while ago, and I just thought I would ask you about I don't think you have a singular method for contacting parents. It looked like on your blog that you might use different methods. So tell us a little bit about your efforts to reach out to them.
Well, if I'm going to go no grades, I need a huge letter and I need a video, but I need to fit it on one page. So I send that out at the beginning of the year. And then every 2 weeks, I have an update on our website. The kids take pictures. I have a class photographer for each class after the first month or so. And so they take pictures. And after 2 weeks, I put them all in an Animoto video. And I do pay for that. It's like $30 a year, but it's well worth it because I can get up to 10 minutes in a video. And so I just throw those in a video and I put them with a blog post about here's what we did these 2 weeks. Here are the specific plans if you missed anything or you want to see any of the links. I keep that on another sheet that's hyperlinked. And then I email it to the parents. And then I tweet it out. And then the good news homes, though, good notes home, like good calls home, I'm really bad on the phone. But so I do good emails. I think my word choice is pretty good in the emails. And so I send a lot of those out, especially at the beginning of the year, just to say, okay, this is what I noticed about your child. I'm glad to have him or her in my class. And that works wonders for the kids and the parents and me. It's a win-win-win situation because then the kids will come back, wow, thanks for that note. I'm like, yeah, no problem. You stood out in that way and that was really nice. And so I make sure that I'm conscious about those. At the end of the year, it gets a little hard to get them all in, but especially at the beginning of the year, first couple quarters. And then I do that because I'm a little in control on this one. Like I have to have a spreadsheet. Like, did I get to this kid? And then it does show me the kids I have not gotten to, and I need to pay more attention to them and see what I can see in them, see the good stuff in them. Even though they might be a challenge, I'm looking for the good. And that's helpful for me too, to look for that good in every child. So the good notes home are easy thing for anybody to do. Just keep your eyes open and send some good notes home. The website has been helpful because I can just reference everything there. Here's where I keep this. Here's where I keep this. Please look at this. And then the 2 week updates in our plans. I just started adding an article that they should check out every 2 weeks. And there was one on the brain development, and one mom was like, oh, thank you. I didn't know this. I'm like, oh, you didn't know this? And middle school is going to be the hardest part yet. So that's nice that some of them are actually reading it. I don't know how many are reading it, but it's there if they want to.
So what has been your biggest challenge since you've made these shifts?
Every year is different. So this year it was the one parent who was really upset with me. That lasted a long time in my head. I think I'm over it now. I'm not sure, but I'll always remember that. But I learned something from it. Every year I learned something from my hard challenges. This year also, fourth quarter was a little hard with the grading because the kids, I think they kind of figured it out, like, hey, she's not going to be really, really hard on us. She's going to kind of let us figure out what our grade is. And I think I could schmooze her to do this. So they're not working as well. Mm-hmm. But I talked to my coworker across the hall and she's like, they're not working for me either. Don't worry. And I'm grading everything. So that made me feel good. It depends on the year really and what I'm trying each year. Since I'm trying something a little different every year, that's usually where I have the biggest problems because I don't know how to communicate it to the parents or the other teachers or the students. And so that's why I can only try one new thing every year, one big thing every year. And then the rest of it can just fall into place. We all are in the same boat. And even if you have, this type of classroom or fewer students or better tables or brighter paint, we're still gonna have the personal kid input, and you never know what that's going to bring. So yeah, just keep going towards the kids and shift what you have to shift that year and go backwards if you have to. And I've had to go backwards and okay, we're not doing that this year because it's just not going to work with this group. I've tried it and that's it. So you just have to remember that, yeah, we're going to have the same issues, just different years or different types that still come and get you in the butt.
Yeah, that's very comforting because I almost asked you this question and I thought I'm not even going to ask this question because I pretty much know what anybody would say. Like those kids who are just so not motivated to do anything. I'm guessing they're not motivated to do anything in whichever classroom they're in.
Right. And don't we have adults like that?
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yes.
You can keep trying, but we can't force them. Yeah.
Right. I had a student this year and I was telling Kate, like, I've done everything I can to be as engaging as possible. I had them at one point researching serial killers. Like I was trying everything. This kid still would do not a thing, but I couldn't do anything. He'd read a book, but not when I gave him. But that's fine. I'm like, I'm so excited that you're reading. That was all he would do. But
I was talking to one of them yesterday that I feel like I talk to them every day. I'm like, I'm so sorry for you that you are not taking this advantage, this time you have to learn what you want to learn, and my husband's like, why do you keep talking to him? I'm like, cause I just don't get it. Like, why is he wasting his time? Why is he sabotaging his learning? But we have adults like that.
And I also said that this kid that I could not get to do anything was so happy all the time.
Yeah, that's great.
Smiley kid, he is just happy to be there. He's not doing anything, but he's so happy to be there.
That's great.
That's something. I will find things to make myself feel better about this.
Right.
Well, we have really enjoyed you being with us. Give a plug. Let us know how our audience can find you, can learn more about you and access some of those resources. Like your live binder is ridiculously useful.
That's from all those people. That was, if you follow the hashtag Genius Hour on Twitter or 20 Time or Passion Projects, everybody's sharing so much great stuff. And I just have to put it all in one spot because I have the parents who are like, this is crazy. Why are you doing this? So here you are. This is why. And I did that for them first. And then it became a pretty good resource for teachers. But yeah, you can just Google that one. There is a great, it's tinyurl.com/Genius Hour. GH Live Binder. But you can just Google it and it shows up now, which is really nice. I have a feedback binder as well for my no grades and why feedback is more important than a letter. And then on Twitter, I'm just at Joy Kirr. And my blog is geniushour.blogspot.com because it is about my learning. It's about my Genius Hour and what I want to learn and reflect on.
And I have to say that I did go there just a few minutes before we started this interview, and I saw where you posted the video or the song from Steve Moakler.
Right?
And I said, oh my goodness, she's got Steve Moakler on her website.
I just heard that day. I'm like, this is a great song.
Years. That is a great song. I didn't know he'd gone all country and stuff. I guess he did.
And your book, Shift This, where can people find it?
Amazon, kind of crazy. And then the Weebly goes with it. There's a Weebly at shiftthis.weebly.com that has more resources on it now too. Now that it's published, I just keep wanting to add more. I just put that right on the blog.
Very good. So all of these schools doing their summer reading, professional developing, and all of that, it'd be a good time to get the Shift This as well.
There you go. Go to Dave Burgess for the discount on the multiple copies.
Right on.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Joy. It's been a lot of fun interviewing you.
Bye-bye.
So before we get started on our second segment, let me just say props to Joy for making all the changes that she's made in her classroom after being in education for so many years. I can definitely relate to that.
You could say that you are giving her an ode to joy. Ode to joy. That's pretty good. I'm the same way. She, in her book, starts out describing the path to change in her career, and how that for the first 15 years she was not in her own classroom, and that she was working with a group of students from, I think it's like ages 3 to 17, people who had difficulties or challenges with hearing loss. And so it was quite an evolution for her to then go into her own classroom and teaching ELA. For, I think now about the last 7 years. You would think that she had probably been doing this for like 30.
Right. And it really does deserve props. I was talking to a relatively new teacher the other day, and she was talking about how confused she was that change was, so difficult for teachers. And I said, well, just stop right there. Teachers tend to get comfortable with what they're doing. Once they figure it out, they just want to go with it. Understandably so. And whenever you're a new teacher, you haven't kind of ingrained those things in your practices. And so it's a lot easier to accept that change. But after being in the profession for a really long time, change gets harder. So, it's definitely not an easy thing to do, especially completely shifting your entire classroom culture and the way that you do life in your classroom.
So not to beat a dead horse, but it's all about the growth mindset. Teachers who think about their career, think about their classroom, and actually make adequate observations, notice the things that don't work well, and the teachers who get better and whose classes are most useful for their kids are the ones who are making those classroom changes. And so that's what this is going to be all about, and what Joy obviously cared enough about to do all of this shifting in her classroom, and cared enough about to write a book on it.
There are a lot of things about my personality that I would change, but one thing that actually comes in handy is that I do love change, especially when it comes to my classroom, because I get bored otherwise. I've known teachers that would just pull out the lesson plans from last year and just go by that and not really, put a lot of thought into changing things up. And I've never been one to like to do that anyway. I like to do things differently. There may be a couple lessons that are really just, I knocked it out of the park with it, or I felt like the students really enjoyed it and I might repeat those. But for the most part, I change it up every year. So I like change. It kind of gives me this new energy and gets me excited. So that's one thing about my personality that helps a little bit with being an educator. There are plenty of things that other people have on me with that. But I do really enjoy change.
Yeah, me too. So to get us beyond then that sort of ambitious attitude, which we both have and our audience likely has, what takes you to the next step? The next step requires us trying to wrestle with some questions like, what happens when students freeze, or the teacher feels a sense of paralysis, or what happens with trying to get students to set their own goals in having ownership in what they're doing in the classroom, or how do we get students to aim higher? Those are a couple of questions.
Well, those are very difficult questions. Whenever I've started trying to put more choice into my lessons, you talked about student and teacher paralysis. That's where I saw it. Whenever students are given too much choice, they tend to freeze up and not know what to do, and they really just want the teacher to guide them. It's what they're used to. It's what, I know that even as an adult, if someone tells me that they want something done, I'm going to ask them a lot of questions about what their expectations are, and, what do you want? What do you expect? How long do you want it to be? Like you want to please the person that you're doing something for. And as long as they are seeing these assignments, these projects as something they're doing for the teacher, then it's only natural that they're going to have a lot of questions. They're going to want some kind of checklist. Tell me what exactly it is that you're expecting so that I can do that. And so whenever you don't give them those restrictions, what's the word I'm looking for?
Guidelines?
Those guidelines. They just don't even know what to do with themselves. They just sit there. So because of that, it's very important that we scaffold that choice, that we start out with giving them maybe a few things to choose from. And then hopefully by the end of the year, we can release them completely to, hey, just however you want to do this. This is what I want. This is the goal. However you want to get there, go for it. But in the beginning of the year, when they are not used to that, that is not going to happen. Most of them will just stare at you, I have found, at least in my classroom.
So those are a couple questions, and you just handled those skillfully, Michelle. Nice job. What about the enrichment kids? The kids who usually maybe 4 or 5 in the classroom, maybe just 1 or 2, who we also want to have some ownership, but these are kids who are already meeting the standards that we're trying to get the others to learn or to master. Well, what do we do with them when it comes to ownership?
So even those kids are the some of the ones that give me the blankest of stares, because they are the ones who are the teacher pleasers, and they want to know what it is that I'm expecting. And what I saw this past year is that at the beginning of the year, I gave them a great deal of choice. I did not give them near as many guidelines. That was a lesson that I learned, as I should have. So at the beginning of the year, I got horrible results from giving them something that involved choice. But then by the end of the year, after I had, kind of cultivated this culture of, figure out how you want to do it, it got a little better. Now, not with all kids, but with some of the kids that you're talking about, those who needed that enrichment because they already had mastered, kind of to the proficient level, and they wanted to go beyond, and they started really finding what it is that they enjoyed and what they were good at. And I'm thinking right now about Nathan, who was on an earlier episode, one of the kids that took over that episode. At the beginning of the year, there is no way that Nathan would have probably even thought to create a video that included memes and text and just craziness in order to be able to just kind of communicate something. But by the end of the year, he was rocking it out. He did such a great job. So
the video was hilarious, by the way.
Yeah. Hilarious. Props to Nathan. Good job, Nathan. But that is not something he would have come up with at the beginning of the year for sure. So I think once we start really building that culture of choice and letting them see there are many different ways to get your point across or to show your mastery in something, that they'll eventually grab onto that and do great things with it. But it definitely is something that needs to be scaffolded from the beginning, which I failed to do last year.
Mm-hmm. So another area is the collaborative environment, where we have some lower achievers who are less productive, and when they're less productive, we tend to put them with a higher achiever. And in those situations, sometimes the kids can feel pretty dragged down and discouraged. So in those situations, that's something else, where each teacher kind of has to grapple with how to handle that and still ensure that we're keeping our most motivated students motivated, and that we're also trying to bring up those who are less. But let's talk a little bit about class environment, shall we?
Okay. Well, it's a good time for you to bring up class environment if you're talking about what the room looks like, because mine basically is a big blank slate at the moment. I put a lot of thought into what I wanted to do with my room. I have put zero action into it pretty much. I did run across a couple of bar stool type chairs at Hobby Lobby that were clearanced way down to $24 from 119, and I got super pumped about it. Went home, told my husband I need him to build me a table. He's got some scrap wood. So, I mean, this is the kind of thought. I've looked everywhere there is to try to find seat cushions that are incredibly cheap because teacher budget non-existent right now. So been looking for really, really cheap cushions because last year I had just 2 cushions and the kids would use it all the time, especially if they sat in the floor because I have them in the floor way more often than you would think. And so I thought I need more cushions because I only have 2 and there's always more than 2 kids sitting in the floor. And so I think I bought one that was clearanced at Walmart to $4 or something. But I've been looking for things that are just really cheap. And so now I'm going to have at least that one kind of bistro style table with those 2 chairs that cost me a total of $48. So bravo to me. But other than that, I've got these 2 blank bulletin boards and I didn't know what in the world to do with them. So I put that out there on Twitter and got some great results. And I don't want to give away these other people's ideas. I'll just kind of, but basically what I wanted is for them to be usable and valuable and not just be Pinterest cute. I'll use that term. Just kind of, that's usually what I do, is just go on Pinterest and find the cutest thing that I can. And I wanted them to actually be something the kids would pay attention to. So I got some really good ideas on Twitter, and I'll put those in the show notes so that I can credit the people who gave those to me. But some of them, I remember Angela Stockman said that you can put arguments up on the board, artifacts of arguments, and then someone else that disagrees with that can put an artifact up beside it, showing their disagreement of that. That was one that I really liked. There were a lot of ideas about posting schoolwork, posting really, I think one teacher said she does a beautiful sentence board, and anytime she comes across a sentence that a student wrote that is exceptional, she puts it up on the board to there are teachers that use it kind of as a refrigerator, like where the kids can put up things that they're proud of. So many different ideas. So I'm really bouncing all those around while my room is still blank. Am I talking super fast today? I feel like I'm talking super fast.
I don't know. I don't happen to see that you have a cup of Starbucks coffee sitting right next to you.
Yeah, I do.
But that's something Joy talked a little bit about. Was she starts out the year with pretty much a blank slate. And I like that because it requires no work to start my room at a blank slate. No, all kidding aside, she said that she does like each year's group to kind of redesign their classroom. She does leave the independent reading list, I think she said, on one of the walls. And she said that she keeps one wall for, I don't remember what she called it, but it was some kind of a literary pull quote board, powerful quote sort of board from their independent reading. And students could, I think she said that they could end up, it might have not even been a board, it might have been or the whole wall or whatever, that they could put the quotes wherever they felt like they wanted to or something. I'd be curious as to see if, what that looked like if that actually is taking place that way. But anyway, that's a really cool idea too.
So I've struggled with desks because I really am jealous of the people who have tables, especially when it comes to collaboration. I feel like there's just a lot that you can do with them instead of having to move 30 desks every time you want to rearrange. And I know that you figured out a way to have both in your room. How did you do that?
I think we discussed this in the interview a little bit, so I won't go through some of that where I had gone and gotten the tables. But basically, I decided I wanted some tables, primarily for the 2 classes that I have that are resource classes, where I have those resource students, for my co-teacher to be able to work with those students as well as I also could. And we did a whole lot of work with putting students into groups at times where they were to sort of ask 3 before me, that sort of thing. When they were in those groups, the idea was that they would determine their learning target proficiency or mastery through the course of a lesson, and they would have a group leader who could help them determine whether they had met their goal for the day. after each student felt like he or she had produced evidence that had met the goal, then they could check with their group leader, and the group leader could then come to me and say, so-and-so has been able to accomplish this goal. That's one thing we did within groups, and these would have been more like, what word would it be, like synchronous groups. All the groups are essentially doing the same thing, but they have a set list of, a checklist of sorts to be able to get through the steps of the assignment, and each step had maybe a learning target associated with it, that sort of thing. And so the tables were good for group work. The tables were good for pull-out groups. The tables are also good for stations where stations or rotational activities. And my tables were grouped at different parts of the room. This year, I do want to add something. It's an old school idea because I remember teachers of mine having it. I do want some tennis balls on the bottom of my chairs.
I would love some tennis balls on the bottom of my chairs.
Because that would at least make it easier to move and less stressful, because it's stressful for me to hear that sound, let alone other teachers underneath my floor. If you're a teacher who's on a second or third floor like we are, that's something that goes through your mind too. So the tennis balls will, I think, at least give me some comfort in knowing I can move chairs and tables easily without the noise. I know in Joy's room, she was excited about her husband helping put casters on the bottom of the table legs, and so that's something as well.
Didn't you tell me that you had something where the kids could interact with one of your boards? They took control over a board or something?
Yeah, the marker board. We have 2 huge marker boards in our classrooms. Most of us do. And I don't need all of one usually, let alone all of 2. And so my second marker board that takes up almost a whole wall, I have my unit titles and unit goals on those, but on one half. But on the other half, I let students use it. And this is probably about an 8-foot wide space. And so
that's a lot of room.
It became like the student board. And so I told them that it can be student news, it can be student information, it could be messages to the other students in other classes, and it became kind of a conglomeration of probably all those things at different times of the year, especially toward the end of the year when people are trying to meet deadlines and go to this yearbook meeting or have these pictures taken and that sort of thing. Students especially put it up for news and announcements.
Oh, I like that. That reminds me, I had a student once who had Asperger's, and he was always kind of shouting out random facts. He was, incredibly smart, awesome kid, and he always knew just random information. And so I had this small whiteboard on my wall, and I said, that is your board. Every day you can just come in and write the fact of the day. So he did. He took that to heart, and he would go every day and write his fact of the day. And if he ever missed because he was absent or something, he would get so stressed out. But the next day he would make sure he would apologize and get his fact of the day up there. And he really liked having that ownership in the classroom, that was his board and what he was in charge of, and he took that seriously. So I like giving kids that space, because they're in there too.
And that's one less thing off your shoulders. I know a lot of teachers who have a quote of the day or a word of the day, or I think Joy has a brain teaser of the day, or at least at one point she did. She references it in the book too. And if we could take some of those other things off of the teacher's responsibility and allow kids to do something they enjoy, that other kids will be more likely to come in and want to read and want to look at because it was kid produced or peer produced instead of teacher produced, then we've alleviated more stress on us, and we've also allowed students to become more interested because of what they're doing, not something we're doing. So that's a big A++ for that.
Yes.
Speaking of A++, let's talk about standards-based grading instead of A++.
Let's not. Let's wait on that one.
Oh, fine. We actually decided that we're going to mention this at this point, but let you know that we're going to come back on a future episode to discuss standards-based grading a little bit.
That one is too big for one episode. And also, Kate and I haven't gotten into it too much, and we want to be able to give you something of value. I completely believe in standards-based grading. I'm going to be piloting it at the high school this year. I'm super excited about all that it entails, but we wanted to just wait until we got all of our ducks in a row before we tried to tackle that and try to offer you any information, and we don't want to lead you astray.
Okay. For that response, you get an extra plus. A plus, plus, plus. That means so much more than the first A plus, huh? All right. So what about then how this all really comes back to, that is, this shifting all comes back to the idea of developing relationships. And Joy has a little bit to say about that, too, in her book, and discussed that with us, too, didn't she?
Yes, and that is building relationships between teachers and students foremost, but also just helping our students to see that we as teachers have respectful relationship with each other, that we can kid around with each other, that we encourage each other, and seeing those positive adult relationships in the building as well. But the entire idea behind shifting culture in our classrooms is so that the students will understand that they are important, that we're here because of them, and we want them to learn, we want them to grow, we want them to mature and to become better human beings. And we're not going to be able to get them there if we don't have a relationship with them, if we don't learn what they enjoy, don't learn what their strengths and weaknesses are, and don't let them see us as human beings. And I think it's just really important that we build those relationships with the kids, that we build relationships with each other, and allow them to see that, we mess up, we fail, we joke around, but we all respect each other and, love each other on a human level of just all being a part of this thing we call school.
Yeah. The first thing I think about is when it comes to building a relationship is the fact that I don't have to become a kid or act like a kid to build a relationship with a kid. There are teachers who think that that's what that is, and that's not really what I'm about either. I think the idea of building a relationship with students, the teacher-to-teacher one is really important. I like what you said about setting an example and modeling that. But with students, it's more about us being selfless and seeing what students' interests are and kind of just observing that, seeing that, talking to them about that, whether that's the sports that they're in, the clubs that they participate in, their family involvement, something they're proud of that a parent does, or a job that they have, or a little brother's success over the summertime, or whatever it is that sometimes we just learn about because we eavesdrop a little bit in their conversations with peers as they're coming in, and we hear what they're talking about, and using those opportunities to hear what drives them and fascinates them is the first step in developing a relationship, because it's not about me, it's about finding out what makes my student tick, and then I think needs. The other part of that, developing a relationship, is noticing students' needs, and those can be academic needs, and you trying to help that student, by showing that student that you may not care about English right now, but you sure do care a lot about football. So you need this class because you may have collegiate potential as a football player, but you will not have collegiate potential academically if you cannot improve some aspects of your English class progress or your academic progress. And so we can help them define or identify their academic needs and connect those to help them understand the importance of those. But then also, of course, other needs. If it's something at home that's hindering them, if it's food on the table or in their stomach that's a problem, or some emotional need. Some of that borderlines help from other sources that a teacher cannot or should not participate in trying to alleviate. But if we could find out about those, we can definitely be the first step in trying to get them to somebody who can help them.
Right. And another reason why we should build relationships is because if you have a good, positive relationship with your students, then your classroom management is going to be a lot better. And that doesn't, and whenever I say classroom management, I don't mean all of your students are sitting straight in a line, not speaking, which is what, I think old school classroom management looked like. But I mean that students will basically do what they're supposed to do and do what you ask them to do if they respect you and they know that you respect them. I know that whenever we talk about changing culture and shifting that culture to more student-centered and giving them all this choice and all this group work and all this moving around, that the number one concern is classroom management. What is my classroom going to look like? How loud is it going to be? How much movement's going to be? Kids are going to be pushing each other. But if you have that relationship and you build those expectations with them, then I think that kind of takes care of itself. We're always going to have problems with classroom management anyway because we're dealing with children. So that's just going to be a thing. So you might as well be doing that in a way that's going to benefit them and help them to learn more and build those relationships with them.
And I suppose last but not least, as far as trying to wrap up this particular episode, this thing about being overt with students, we don't have to hide things from them. We're not trying to play mind tricks with them. If we're trying to develop relationships, we can tell them, we are trying to develop a strong relationship with you, not and for the sake of you being able to trust me and me being able to trust you and to get the most out of each other. You're here for a reason, and I'm here for a reason, and we want to make this year a productive and very good one. I can't stand, being secretive to students. Like, we're expecting them to get to the finish line, but we're not going to tell them the process that we have in mind to get them there. They're just going to somehow one day arrive there. But I like discussing with them very overtly, whether we're talking about giving them choices and telling them just the benefit. The fact that a teacher would say to me, if I'm the student, that you're going to have choice in what you read this year, or you're going to have a choice in what you learn this year. Just being told that tells me that this teacher is not about to try to control me, but instead is actually trying to give me a feeling of liberty and freedom. Mm-hmm. So all of these things where we're shifting, I'm sure it was the same in Joy's classroom as it is in ours, that it's such a great idea to just let your kids know those learning stretches that you are trying to enact in your classroom so that they can perceive what life is all about, that even their own learning is a learning stretch, and there will be things that you change, there will be things that you allow them to have control in, and then in the end, you may not end up having them control it so much, and they'll see that, and they'll understand why, and at least through the process, they'll have a little bit more awareness of the metacognition or the thought processes behind why they're learning the way that they're learning in the classroom.
And I think that in building those relationships and in creating that trust between you and the student, there are two sentences that are very important that every teacher needs to use often. I don't know, and I messed up. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times we don't want to tell them we don't know. So you'll either tell them something that's wrong, or you just ignore the just let them know. I don't know. Let's find it out together. I'm going to be saying that a lot this year. I'm teaching a computer science class for the first time, so believe me, I don't know is going to come out of my mouth a lot, and so we're going to have to figure it out together. And the other one is just teachers that won't admit they made a mistake. Just go ahead and fess up, because we all make mistakes. We all fail. We all goof up at times, and so I don't know, and I messed up.
Yeah, and it kind of falls into the realm of structure, what we're talking about here, how much you're going to give kids control, how much control you are going to have. Loose or tight structure is something that our principal talks a lot about. And I think of it kind of like a weight room, that if you were to come to Oxford High School where we teach, this is one of the places our principal likes to go with any visitor that comes to our campus. It's our weight room, because it is incredible. The equipment that is there is top notch, and there's tons of it for probably the whole offensive line or the whole offense or the whole defense of the team can work out on all the equipment at the same time. It's got the aesthetic appeal. It's very, very pretty or neatly done with all of the artwork of our yellow jackets and our big O and all the colors. All of that's there. But when you see those guys working out, they are working out to loud music in this pretty room with this really great equipment that's going to test their muscles, and they're going to be talking to each other, and there's no wonder that our football team is as good as it is. It's because the people who are in charge, so to speak, have made sure that they have the materials and the environment with the music and so on to make getting pumped up fun, getting strong fun. And there are others you might be familiar with, a weight room in a school that is the opposite. There isn't much equipment. It's dirty. It's like a dungeon, and you only want to go there for 5 minutes, and you're wanting to run away because it just did not entice you or welcome you to want to learn. And so, I think about our classrooms the same way. That we want to structure it in a way that is inviting and makes the learning fun. Are there still weights there? Am I still going to be challenged? Yeah, but I'm going to be challenged while also thinking that this is almost easy, and this is a lot of enjoyment for me. Mm-hmm. So I know you went to the Ron Clark Academy recently. And structure, when I think of Ron Clark, I think a lot of music playing and partying, right?
I think people immediately go to the kids and teachers walking on tables, and it's loud there. You got drums playing and music, and that is true. But one thing that they talk about that they work a lot on is that's building relationships and structure. So you may get the impression that whenever you just see pictures or short videos of the Ron Clark Academy that there is no structure, but there is a lot of structure. There's a lot of rules that these students have to follow, but at the same time, they're having a great time. And they're able to do that, to give them so many rules, to have so much structure, and to be able to get away with walking on tables because of the relationship. They know that these kids know that they can trust their teachers and that they're loved. And because of that, the teachers are able to really get on to them whenever they misbehave, and they know that it's out of love that they're being disciplined as well. So all of that just comes back around to that whole idea of doing what's best for the students.
Well done. You tied all of that together so well.
And go me.
And the love thing, now that's just something you can't teach, is it?
It is not.
No. Which you just kind of made me start thinking a little bit there about maybe one of the reasons why some of us do fail at this job is just do we care about kids?
Yeah, you got to have the heart for kids, or the rest of it's just pointless.
It can be hard. Well, we are so glad you stuck with us through this really awesome episode of Across the Hall. Awesome, not because of Michelle or me, but maybe
because
Michelle,
of Joy.
But because of Joy. So we are so grateful that she was with us, and we're excited to be able to pass along this to you.
Thanks so much for listening to episode 13. Don't forget to stop by acrossthehallpodcast.com for the show notes and join the Across the Hall conversation at #XTheHall on Twitter, where our handle is @AcrossTheHall, where the O in across is a 0. If you enjoy our show, please leave a review on iTunes. Bye, y'all.